Okay, it's my pleasure now to introduce the keynote speaker. Throughout the years, we've tried to bring in people who have some insight on the ticket industry, from whether it was Stan Kasten, the president of the Nats, or Darren Ravel from ESPN, or Sean Moriarty, president of Ticketmaster. This person fits very well into that. He is the director of ticketing for UC Davis. He's a contributor to a number of publications, including Ticketing Today and Seat Magazine. He's a board member of the Association of Luxury Seat Dealers, and he's often speaking about the ticket industry, the business, and most notably, he's the publisher of the Tao of Sports blog. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Troy Kirby.
I guess I'd like to start by talking about an ecosystem. We kind of discuss whether or not a primary or secondary market exists, but we rarely talk about how it develops into an ecosystem. There are certain things that feed off of each other, need in order to survive, and yet one side of the ecosystem really gets ignored, which is your side of the market, especially by the primary side. I wanted to show an example. I know with a suit, you say, okay, he's obviously got everything that comes with a suit. He's got the nice dress shoes, he's got the pants, he's got the jacket, he's got the shirt. But I decided today instead to show you something that's off-putting normally to the business world if you're going to wear a suit. And that is, I wore white tube socks. Yeah, I know, right up there. Okay, but what does that really kind of mean for you guys? That means that you guys are the white tube socks. You're necessary, you serve a purpose, and yet people would think, oh no, that's not necessarily appropriate. The problem with that is that a lot of times the primary market, especially in the world of sports, do not understand how necessary the secondary market is to their primary business. They're really bipolar about this, and it's really frustrating when I talk to people on the primary side because a lot of them go, they're taking our money. They don't realize that you're actually causing a lot of the demand that they get from general customers by taking over their inventory, pushing it off to the secondary. And when somebody looks at the primary market, the first time they look, they see seats that are filled. That is something that is inherent to building demand, seats that are filled, things that are gone. Now, you've obviously pushed them over to the secondary market, but if you didn't have that, you would have customers that would see loads of empty seats in a time where it's really easy to see how many seats are available and how much inventory is generally available. We don't understand how typically, distribution channels work. That's one of the biggest problems that we have in this industry is really your distribution channel. Imagine if Netflix was buying all the rights to all of these movies and then Universal came around and said, I know you bought the rights, but I can't let you charge to have other people view it. It's insane. What if we did the same with hotels, Hotwire or Expedia? Yeah, you buy a block of rooms, but I can dictate that you can't sell them. That's erroneous. Why would somebody do that? Every single channel in the world is built on a wholesaler and a secondary market. Whether we realize it or not, it's a distribution channel. Either that or grocery stores need to go out of business because grocery stores are the biggest distribution channel there is for most food that we have here. I'm sure that you could buy food from a wholesaler, but that's generally not how it's done. It really, though, comes down to understanding demand in general. When a new season opens, after all, you guys are buying all the inventory. You push those consumers to actually understand what demand is because they see all the seats gone, and if they don't act quick, those seats are devoured by all of that inventory going over the secondary. That matters because without resellers, really primary goes flat. They have no seat inventory and it becomes a straight consumer demand. Now the evidence of this is every time they've tried to shut out a broker, and I know that some of you have experienced that where you'll see big major events where they say, well, we're not selling to brokers. One of them would have been at Yankee Stadium where they really try to control the amount of brokers that got to the Winter Classic. And then of course they had empty seats. They can't figure this out, so they're trying to fight with the league to say, hey, we don't want to actually pay for this inventory because we didn't get the right to sell it. That isn't the way things work. If you can't sell it, you're supposed to sell it to somebody who can sell it for you. And if they find the availability and they can actually find somebody to buy it at a higher price, good on them. That's capitalism. You're all entrepreneurs. And that's something that a lot of people avoid saying. They like to think that somehow you're grafting on. But if you can find something of value that somebody else does not value, and you can resell it at a higher price, that makes you a genius, not a criminal. And that, I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is they consider it an abusive relationship. Sure, when they're doing well, they kick out your tickets, they get upset at you for existing. But when they're doing bad, who do they call? Oh, they love you. Then they're broker friendly. They love being broker friendly. Isn't that amazing? You guys are the world's biggest booty call. Think about it. Every time that they're trying to move about 2,000 tickets to make that sellout, who do they call? Even though you have to eat probably about 500 of those 2,000 tickets, you want to keep the relationship going. But yet, nobody says, hey, this is, maybe this is great, but when you're doing well, are you going to boot me out with my tickets? Oh, not right now. Not right now. We're a broker-friendly regime. Till the regime changes over, and then all of a sudden you get people that say, oh no, we're anti-broker, or they just won't say it, but then they'll move along. And why do they move along? Because they're also making money on the front end. See, they don't mind if you buy their tickets, they just don't really want you making money at them, even if you can show that you can turn them around for a profit. So when they're bipolar, I'm not kidding. One of the things that really bothers me is how they tax you out of existence sometimes. Look at broker fees. I don't know if anybody has experienced those. Some of the clubs have tried to do those where they'll charge you 3% extra because you're out of the state. Okay, so let's say you're in Phoenix and you're a customer that wants to buy something in LA. You're just buying standard season tickets. Even if they recognize your out-of-state address, are they really charging you that 3% out-of-state fee? Well, only if they think you're going to resell them. But they don't if you're generally just a regular customer. My point is they're selective enforcement. They don't also consider the 15% that you guys also get charged by StubHub. They don't consider any of the other fees that you have to go through, P.O. boxes or mailing stuff out or whatever you end up doing that ends up cutting into your profit margin and then eventually your yield. Instead, they just see it as this ungodly profit. That's what the misunderstanding of the primary market's opinion of the secondary market is. They think you're making all this money. If that's necessarily true, let them actually try to do it, because the majority of the time, that's not what they're going to do. And in fact, you're helping them save money and time by clearing inventory to your customers who they haven't been able to facilitate. Really the state of the secondary comes down to this. I mean, people don't understand exactly what the secondary market is if they're not in it. This was a horrible year for sports tickets overall. It wasn't really the greatest year. But for arts and entertainment and concerts, it was pretty damn good, right? And that's because, think of it like a state. A state that has good farming and good technology, one's up, the other's down. It kind of offsets each other. That's what you guys do. You guys kind of parlay across the board because you know that if you focus on one team, you're going to get screwed. If you were LA Lakers and that's it, if that's all you bought in terms of tickets, you'd have been screwed this year because they would have had the same inflated price. They don't understand that you buy more than just their tickets. And I think they just think that you think that it's wholly universal, their product, and that's going to continue on. And that's one of the problems that goes with this. They'd rather spend 45 to 60 salespeople. They'd rather enforce that and have commissions up the yin-yang, and then have 80 to 100 calls per person in order to sell tickets, rather than just shift a lot of those tickets to you and have you deal with them on your customer base. How insane is that you can actually save them money on the front end, and they don't understand that. They actually think that you're costing them money. That's part of the bipolarness of really sports in general. And this comes down to dynamic ticket pricing. I do not like dynamic ticket pricing. I think a lot of times it inflates demand. I'll give you an example. You buy tickets right here on, from the team themselves. Well, they count that as demand, and they measure their price, and then they jack it up. But then when you list that price again on the secondary market, they say, oh, that's now the price of the ticket. So their remaining inventory goes up to meet yours. So essentially they're counting demand twice. It really cuts into your margins. It cuts into the fact of whether or not you can exist, and that's why sometimes you've seen less brokers around here, less professional brokers. And my problem with that is specifically that it curbs demand for your product, and they don't care, but they should. Why should they care? Because the less professional brokers there are, the more ticket cowboys, paper cowboys there are. This is a kind of a term that I've kind of created because of the fact, honestly, paper cowboys are the idiots that are doing the 4 seats as a hobby in their kitchen, and then they jack up the price, or if they don't think they can get anything, they sell them at 78 cents. And then, of course, there's a media firestorm over the fact there's no value for tickets, so then people get ticked. And then the teams get ticked because then some VIP tries to sell his tickets on the secondary market, can't get the same price for them because guess what? Everybody else is trying to sell for less, and it really kills the secondary market in general. And really it comes down to this. Everybody's got to make money, including the people that they don't think should make money. If you're taking advantage of them who have not been able to figure out their price points forever, that's on them. They have a whole teams of people that, are data analytics, and yet they can't figure out their own prices. That's not your fault. That really comes down to whether or not they've been able to determine their own demand. I think that analytics, though, kind of gets a little different in how it's going to start detecting you guys in general. I think that P.O. boxes and credit cards are going to be something that's of the past, where you could have 50 credit cards or a bunch of P.O. boxes, because they're going to be able to detect that. The problem is you've got to have, really kind of an alignment to assure that they're not going to have barcode eliminators. Just eliminate all your barcodes once you get them. And as much as they like to say they won't do that, I'm sure there are venues out there that are doing that right now. They find out you're a broker, except when they need you. And that's one of the biggest problems. We have major ticket platforms that arbitrarily decide if they want to become a secondary market or if they're okay with it. And a lot of times they'd rather take your money twice or shift over demand rather than allow you to have it. And I really don't understand this idea that you guys don't own the ticket if you bought it. I mean, if I buy the ticket, don't I own it? I mean, because they're not going to repay me if all of a sudden, I don't use that ticket or it perishes. If I bought a car right now from Ford and I resell that car, does Ford have the ability to tell me I cannot, sell it, or I have to give them a revenue share of that? It's ridiculous. Everything else in the world you would be upset at the idea of that, but yet then they hold you accountable for that and assume that really this legalese is the only way that they assume they're broker friendly when really they're not. And if they're always willing to let you take a loss rather than always make a profit, maybe they're not the people for you. Maybe they're not the business for you. So I don't really agree with the idea of broker friendliness. I think that a lot of times that's something they say to get your money up front, and then if you're actually making money, then they're upset at you. I think that honestly, if you guys are going to start looking at stuff, I think it should be that any team, any ticket platform, any venue that tries to cancel your tickets, you don't work with anymore. And that means collectively. I don't think they should try to extort additional fees out of you. I think that's ridiculous. They don't do that for anybody else. So it's selective enforcement and really selective taxation. And if there's one thing that this entire country was founded on, it's the idea of no selective taxation. I mean, they threw tea in the harbor for a reason. And I don't think that they should yank tickets every time that a regime changes. I think that's ridiculous. All of a sudden they're broker friendly, all of a sudden they're not. Either they're one or the other. Are those your seats or are they somebody else's? The attempt to control the secondary market kind of comes from the idea that teams have a lot of times just tried to work with one or two brokers. They'll try to force professional resellers out. They start getting all those paper cowboys. They don't get it. And consolidation is where maybe they want this industry to be headed, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, especially when you have ticket platforms that are really trying to reserve the secondary market for itself. I mean, they're isolating out people, and yeah, they're making some money, but at the same time, they're really costing themselves with the customer base they don't have. I got in trouble, this week. I mentioned something at one of the other conferences. I called a major ticket platform a cartel. And some people got upset about that because they're also reselling their tickets. And I wanted to actually say that, what, quote, a cartel is. It's an association of suppliers with the purpose of maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition. I think that's a cartel. I mean, just because you're settling cases before they go to trial, so you don't actually have to admit any guilt, does not mean that you've somehow it's legal of what you're doing. That just means you put it in the marketing plan in order to really cover your bases. And whatever they want to put on the back of a ticket does not make it legally true. It's never actually been challenged whether or not they can say that's a revocable license. And if it is, then why can't it be revocable on both sides? If you buy it and then all of a sudden you decide not to go, why can't they just automatically refund you? If they're going to automatically cancel your tickets at a drop of a hat, I think that they should consider both. I'm not a fan of consolidation. I'm not a fan of cartels, but I don't think one single reseller actually in a consolidated contract works because it doesn't allow everybody else to thrive. And if you cannot parlay the amount of seed inventory you have in general, I don't think it helps you yield a profit, because if you're focused on one team, you're focused on one area, you end up getting screwed because the Cubs end up sucking, or all of a sudden that Britney Spears concert doesn't work. You have to diversify. This is where the power of one really comes in, and I'm really a firm supporter of it. I know some people, when I talked at the other conference, were kind of going, yeah, I don't really care about that. I don't really, why do I care about my competition? Even drug cartels work together. I mean, Pablo Escobar was eliminating people, and still he got together with the other people that were around to say, this is silly. We don't want our product on the street for less than it should be. We also don't want to deal with people that are not helping us and are actually taxing us. That's where you guys need to be. You honestly need to be working together as an organization, setting standards and saying, sorry, if I'm going to buy your product, if I'm going to buy your tickets, you cannot do all these things and be unsavory and eliminate half of my competition, because what ends up happening when you do that, they come after you next. I think the teams have a lot of responsibilities. I think that the best way to avoid secondary market ticket dumping is really working with tickets resellers rather than against them. I know that sounds erroneous because a lot of you go, well, I'm not gonna allow them to see who I am. I mean, that's silly. Once they change regimes or change their minds, suddenly they're against me. Again, that comes down to whether or not you've built up a relationship with them and whether or not you can actually trust them. I don't know that brokers necessarily want to expose themselves. I mean, a lot of times if you expose yourself, you're really kind of guilty of your own punishment when they decide to change. And again, it comes down to everybody has to make money, but teams still do not understand this. And without the risks, honestly, they're not doing it themselves. But they don't understand they're actually taking a liquidity risk by not allowing you to buy their tickets. Because a lot of those tickets, if that's set inventory that sits on the primary market and just sits there and rots, they don't make anything. They guarantee the amount of money that they're getting from you. They should be thrilled. If they can't do that, that's their problem. But yet, few teams are actually willing to risk this. I think that when you have these fan memberships and these other things, I don't know if anybody's heard of these. They're coming to a new concept, and they're throwing out all this money. One team threw out $700,000 to do fan memberships, which is like a rebranding of season tickets. And this is supposed to do these extra parties for customers and all these other things to try to get them alive. Notice you guys don't need any of that. You guys take the amount of season tickets or whatever. You don't need the bobbleheads. You don't need all the crap unless you got a kid and then you give them some of them. But, I mean, honestly, you don't need all of that garbage. And yet they're so willing to spend on people that need enticement in order to buy their product long term when you're willing to take it off their hands, willing to separate it out. That doesn't sound like it saves them money. It sounds like it costs them money. I think, though, that if we're going to really come forward as an industry, if teams are going to be able to dictate a floor on the secondary market, then you guys should be able to dictate really a ceiling on the primary. I know that's a little kind of radical thinking, but really it comes down to the power of one, whether or not resellers work together rather than apart. You guys clear about 25 to 50% of some of the inventory that teams have. I think that's very significant. I think that honestly, if you guys went away tomorrow, which they don't understand, all of a sudden they've got a ton of empty seats and no explanations. The media doesn't understand brokers. The media likes to focus on a giant number. Media likes to go, oh, that's Boston Red Sox, Yankees tickets, that's for $3,000, that's outrageous. They don't realize that's 2 tickets that some knucklehead put on the market, or that the game's been sold out, or that those are premium seats that are normally going for $25,000 a year, and this is the big chance to actually make your money back. They don't realize that. But instead, they like to punish you for that. And, I think it really comes down to understanding without brokers, without resellers, premium inventory rots. The demand deflates overall, and really the value of seeding overall drops, and the primary market doesn't understand that. I'll give you an example of something that has been a PR win for Cleveland, of all places. Johnny Manziel comes to town. All of a sudden, he gets drafted by the Browns. Suddenly, 3,000 tickets, season tickets, actually get gobbled up the next day. Amazing. I'm going to say that might have been resellers that had a little bit to do with that. You know, LeBron's Decision 2.0 suddenly sold out for season tickets automatically. I don't know if, that many people that weren't buying already that all of a sudden had $25,000, $30,000 to spend on season tickets, except for a reseller, except for somebody like DreamTix who had the ability with a consolidated deal in order to do that. I mean, the teams benefit from the good PR, but without resellers, that doesn't happen. So I want to say that, I look at it as you guys are very valuable to the industry. I don't think a lot of people understand that, even though they're on the primary side, because they see short term. And they don't see the long-term view of exactly what they get. But I think it starts small with working together, and you guys can actually build something pretty big. I mean, right now there's, 200 Major League teams, and there's possibly, 1,000, professional resellers. When are you guys going to come together? Is it going to be at 100 resellers are left? 10? You have to decide that you want to come together, despite whatever differences you have, despite the fact that you can undercut each other. And really you want to come together because of the fact that you don't want to individually get screwed, and you actually want to have a good deal for everybody. I think the longer it takes, the less numbers you have, the less power that you do have. So I do want to say thank you for having me here, and I do appreciate you guys. And I know that's weird to hear from a primary person, but I do think it matters. So thank you very much.